The motel room that appeared only after midnight. I want to begin with what I know about the motel itself. Because the motel is real, it appears on maps, it has a star rating on 3 different travel websites, and I have a receipt from it in a filing cabinet in my home office that I take out sometimes and look at. Just to remind myself that at least part of what happened can be verified. The motel is called the Pineview Rest on US 41 in northern Wisconsin, and it has 22 rooms arranged in 2 single-story wings around a gravel parking lot. I have confirmed 22 rooms with the owner, a tired-looking man named Bert who has run the place for 15 years. 22 rooms, not 23. My name is Christopher Allen. I am a travel writer, or I was. I have since moved into other work, for reasons that will become clear. I was driving the northern Wisconsin circuit for a regional magazine, collecting material on small-town character and road stop culture. The kind of assignment that sounds romantic and involves a great deal of time in places like the Pineview Rest. I arrived at approximately 9 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. Bert gave me room 14, which was clean and smelled of industrial lavender and had a window that faced the parking lot. I had dinner at a diner 3 miles south and returned to the motel at around 11:30. The lot was quiet. A few other cars, 3, I noted, belonging to the other occupied rooms. I could not sleep. This is common for me in unfamiliar places. I am a light sleeper and new sounds intrude. I lay in the dark and listened to the particular acoustic profile of the motel. The ice machine at the end of the corridor, a truck passing on US 41 every few minutes, the distant television in one of the neighboring rooms. At some point past midnight, I had not checked the clock, but I estimate between 12:30 and 1 a.m., I became aware of light under my door. Not the hallway light, which I had noted was a low night safety fixture. This was brighter, warmer, and it pulsed very slightly, the way light pulses when it comes from a source that is not entirely stable. I got up. I looked through the peephole. The corridor was normal, the same low safety lighting I had walked through earlier. But from further down the corridor, from a direction I associated with the end of the wing, there was additional light, warm, coming from what appeared to be an open door. I opened my door and looked down the hallway. At the far end of the wing, past room 16, which was where I believed the corridor ended. I had walked this corridor to the ice machine and noted room 16 as the last door. There was another door, open, light coming from inside. I walked toward it. The door was between where room 16's exterior should end and the exterior wall of the wing. The geometry of the building, as I had understood it from the outside, did not accommodate another room at this location. But the door was there, and it was open, and the light from inside was warm and yellow and inviting in the way that light is when it comes from a room with good lamps and a low ceiling. I looked in. It was a motel room, a nicer one than mine, not dramatically so, but with the particular quality of a room that has been recently furnished rather than maintained. A made bed with a deep green coverlet, a desk with a lamp, a wingback chair in the corner that no standard motel room includes, a window, which should not have been possible given the building's exterior geometry, showing what appeared to be the parking lot, but with a different arrangement of cars, different cars I had not seen in the lot. On the desk, a book, open and face down, a glass of water, a notepad with writing on it. I did not go in. I stood at the doorway for perhaps 2 minutes, looking at the room and the room's objects and the window that showed the wrong parking lot. Then I walked back to room 14 and sat on the edge of my bed and thought carefully. In the morning, I walked the corridor again. Rooms 12, 13, 14, mine 15, 16, and then the corridor wall. No door between 16 and the wall. I pressed my hand against the wall. Solid, cool, normal plaster over frame construction. I asked Bert at checkout if there had been any renovations recently. He said no. I asked if the wing had ever had more than 8 rooms. He looked at me curiously and said, "No, always 8 rooms, 16 total in both wings, plus the office unit. 22, I said, and he agreed, 22. 22 rooms, not 23. I wrote the piece for the magazine and did not include any of this. But I have thought about room 23, or whatever it should be called, every week since. I think about the green coverlet in the wingback chair and the window showing a different parking lot. I think about the notepad on the desk with writing on it that I was close enough to see but not close enough to read. I went back once, 6 months later. Different season, different car. I got room 14 again. Bert seemed to prefer putting single travelers in 14. I waited until past midnight and walked the corridor. The door was there. Open again. The same warm light. This time I read the notepad. It said, "You have been here before." I had not. I had never been to the Pineview Rest before the October visit. The notepad had 4 more lines below the first. I read all of them. I am not going to tell you what the other lines said, because some things are private and some things are warnings and some warnings are personal. What I will tell you is that I checked out the following morning without speaking to Bert, and I drove south for 4 hours before I stopped. And I have not driven US 41 since. The room exists only after midnight. I believe this with the certainty of direct experience. Sometime between midnight and the hours before dawn, a door appears at the end of the corridor in the east wing of the Pineview Rest. And behind it is a room with a green coverlet and a wingback chair and a window that looks out at a different night. I don't know whose room it is. I don't know who leaves the notepad and writes on it. I don't know how the window shows a different parking lot through a wall that has no window. I know the room knew I had been there before, even though I hadn't. And I know that the 4 lines below the first are mine, and have been for a long time, written down in a room that only exists when the rest of the world is asleep. Waiting for me to read them. I read them. I drove south for 4 hours. Some notes are not meant to be acted on immediately. Some warnings are long game things. They plant in you and grow in the dark, and eventually, when the time is right, they mean what they always meant and you know what to do. I am still waiting to know what to do. The notepad is in my memory. Perfect, unfading, every word. When the time comes, I'll recognize it. The room has been waiting long enough. I think I have too. Story 2 of 20, every door in my house. Led somewhere different. The first thing I want to establish is that I am a structural engineer. I have a degree from a good university, 15 years of professional practice, and a working understanding of how buildings are built and how they behave. I know what is possible inside a constructed space and what is not. I know that a door, when opened, leads to whatever is physically on the other side of it. This is not complicated. This is geometry. My name is Patricia Holt. The house is on Elmira Street in a mid-sized Midwestern city that I am going to decline to name for reasons that have nothing to do with privacy and everything to do with not wanting anyone to visit the house on Elmira Street. It is a Victorian-era structure. 4 bedrooms, original woodwork. The kind of house that real estate listings describe as having character, which is the word realtors use for old and complicated. I had lived there for 3 years without incident. I know the house the way a structural engineer knows any building she inhabits, with professional attention to detail. an awareness of the load-bearing walls, the foundation, the places where the old construction shows its age, and the places where it has held up better than anything built today. I knew that house. In November of the year, I am not going to specify, the house began to disagree with my knowledge of it. It started with the basement door. The basement door is at the end of the kitchen hallway, a heavy wooden door with a brass knob opening onto the basement stairs. I have used this door hundreds of times. I know the particular creak it makes in the third step down, the way the temperature drops as you descend, the smell of old concrete and the dehumidifier running. On a Tuesday evening, I opened the basement door and found myself looking at the backyard. Not the top of the basement stairs. The backyard. My actual backyard. I could see the oak tree, the garden shed, the neighbor's fence. Viewed, apparently, from the level of the kitchen floor, as if the door opened onto a raised deck I had never built. I closed the door, stood in the kitchen for a moment, then opened it again. Basement stairs. The third step with its familiar creak when I tested it with one foot. I went back upstairs and had a glass of water and decided, as rigorously as I could, that I had experienced some kind of visual disturbance, fatigue, blood sugar, any of the things that briefly scramble the brain's processing. I noted it and moved on. The following Thursday, the bathroom door, which had always opened onto the bathroom, opened onto the upstairs hallway, from a different angle than my position in the hall, as if the door were positioned elsewhere in the hall, and I were looking through it at myself from a position I was not standing in. I saw myself, standing in the hallway, looking at the bathroom door, and through the bathroom door, I saw myself looking at the bathroom door. I closed the door quickly. The mirror self had looked startled at exactly the moment I had been startled. Perfect correspondence. But the angle was wrong, the geometry was wrong. It was not my reflection. Reflections don't show you from angles that require a different camera position. I began keeping a log, a structural engineer's log, precise, dated, timed, descriptive. Over the following 3 weeks, the front door, on 2 occasions, opened onto a room I had never seen before. A sitting room with old furniture and a fire that was burning low, the kind of fire that had been going for hours, the embers deep red. No one in the room on either occasion. The room smelled of cedar and something I couldn't identify. The bedroom closet opened onto a dark space, not my closet with its ordered rows of clothes, but a dark and apparently extensive space, like a room that had never been furnished and never been lit, that went back further than any closet could go. I did not go in. I could hear something in the dark, far back, that I am going to describe simply as breathing, not frightening breathing, not threatening breathing, just the ordinary sound of something that breathes existing in the dark of my closet. The back door, once, opened onto what appeared to be the inside of my house. From outside, looking in, I was standing at my own back door, looking through it at my own kitchen from the outside perspective, while simultaneously standing in my kitchen. I called a colleague, a structural engineer named Robert, who specializes in historic buildings and has, in the course of his career, encountered a wide range of building anomalies. I described what was happening without, initially, the more extreme examples. He suggested foundation shifting, framing issues, the way old buildings settle and distort. I said, "The basement door opened onto the backyard." He was quiet. Then I told him the rest. He said, "Pat, I've heard of this." "What do you mean?" "Buildings," he said slowly, "especially old ones, especially ones that have been in continuous occupancy for a long time. There's a theory. Not mainstream, not peer-reviewed, you understand. but among people who work with very old construction. He paused. A building can develop a kind of memory, a spatial memory. If the same doors have been opened 1,000 times, 10,000 times, the space around them develops something, a habit. And sometimes the habit and the current physical reality stop being the same thing. A building's memory, I said. I told you it wasn't mainstream, he said. He came and walked the house with me the following weekend. He was thorough. He examined the foundation, the framing, the doors, and their frames. He found nothing structurally wrong. The building was sound. We opened the basement door together. Basement stairs, third step creak, normal. We opened the front door, front porch, normal. It doesn't happen when you're watching, I said. He nodded slowly. When you're watching, he said, you're bringing your current knowledge of the space. You know what's on the other side of the door, and you're right. He looked at the front door thoughtfully. When you're not watching, when you open the door without the full force of your certainty, the building's memory takes over. I've moved since. Different house, newer construction, nothing with history enough to have developed whatever a Victorian on Elmira Street develops over 130 years of continuous use. I don't open doors without looking at them first. I know this is not reasonable behavior for a person in a normal house. I do it anyway. I put my hand on the knob, and I look at the door, and I say, clearly, in my mind, I know what is on the other side of this door. Then I open it. So far, so good. The house on Elmira Street is occupied again, a young family from what I've heard. I hope for them what I hope for anyone who lives in a very old building with very deep habits. I hope the doors remember where they're supposed to go. And when they forget, I hope the family has the good sense to close the door gently and wait, and then open it again. And find the basement stairs, the third step, the creak. Find what was always there. Find the house they think they know. Story 3 of 20. I found a missing person, living in my attic. Let me be precise about the timeline, because precision matters, and because the timeline is one of the things that has kept me awake on more nights than I can count. I moved into the house on the 14th of September. I found the missing person on the 3rd of November. That is 50 days during which I was living below someone who was listed on a national database as having disappeared 7 months earlier, from a city 400 miles away, under circumstances that the police described as suspicious. My name is Grace Nakamura. I am a paralegal. I am precise by training and by temperament. I take notes, I keep records. When something in my life doesn't add up, I document the gap. The first sign was the sound. A house has its sounds, settling, pipes, wind through whatever gaps the weatherproofing hasn't sealed. I catalog the sounds of my new house in the methodical way I catalog most things. The radiator knock, the tree branch against the east window in wind, the particular groan of the third step on the main staircase. Normal. What was not normal was the sound from the ceiling of the master bedroom, which had an access panel to the attic in the corner. A low, periodic sound. Footsteps, I thought at first, and dismissed it because houses produce sounds that register to the human ear as footsteps, particularly at night when other sounds are quiet and the brain is pattern-seeking. But the sound had rhythm, the particular arrhythmic rhythm of a person moving with deliberate quiet. The specific pausing, testing, careful placement that you don't get from structural movement or pipes or branches. The sound of a person trying not to be heard. I noted it on October 8th. I noted it again on October 12th, October 15th, October 19th. By the end of October, I had 8 notes in my log. 8 separate instances of the specific sound of quiet human movement from my attic. I did not go up immediately. I recognize this as, in retrospect, not the response that would be recommended. But I live alone, and the attic access panel is in my bedroom ceiling, and opening a panel into a dark space above your head where something is making human sounds felt at 2 a.m, like a worse option than noting it and addressing it in daylight. On the 2nd of November, I called the landlord. Described the sounds. He came and went into the attic with a flashlight and came down shaking his head. Nothing up there, he said. Old insulation and the HVAC ducts and a lot of accumulated dust. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has had difficult tenants before and is filing this situation. On the 3rd of November at 11 p.m., I heard the sound again. More clearly than before, sustained, not brief. And then a cough, a human cough, stifled but not entirely suppressed. One single cough, directly above my bed. I got up. I pulled the access panel open. I said, into the dark, "I know someone is there. I'm going to turn on a flashlight. Please don't be frightened." Then I turned on the flashlight. She was in the far corner of the attic, in the space between 2 duct runs, where someone small could fit if they folded themselves carefully. She was small, slight, maybe 110 pounds, dark-haired, young. She was looking at me with an expression that I can only describe as resigned. Not frightened. Resigned, as if she had been waiting for this moment since before she knew it was coming. I said, "I'm going to get you some water and some food. Are you hurt?" She said nothing. I said, "You've been up here for a while." She said, "Since August." August. She had been in my attic since August. The house had been empty in August, the previous tenant had left in July, and I had moved in September. She had been there through the empty house and into my occupancy. 50 days of my occupancy. She had heard me below her every day, and I had heard her on 8 documented occasions, and neither of us had said anything until she coughed. I brought her water and food. I sat on the floor of the bedroom below the open panel, and we talked, carefully, for a long time. I am a paralegal. I know how to ask questions. I know how to listen to answers that are partial and arrived at slowly. She told me she had left her city in February, that she had not been taken, had not been abducted, she had left. That the circumstances she had left were circumstances she was not going to describe in detail, and I was not going to push her on, because I knew from her voice and her body, and the way she folded her arms when she mentioned home, that pushing was the wrong tool. She told me she had been moving from place to place, from empty space to empty space. That she had found the attic in August and had stayed because it felt, in the way that places do when you're looking for them, like a place that would hold her. I asked her if she wanted me to call anyone. She said no. I believed her. I asked her if she needed help. She said she didn't know yet. I made up the couch. I told her it was warmer. She looked at the couch and then at the attic opening for a long time, and then she climbed down. She stayed for 3 weeks on the couch, and then in the spare room when I offered it. She ate dinners with me sometimes and not others. She called a person, I don't know who, twice, both times speaking quietly and briefly. She was beginning to look less like someone folded into the smallest possible space. I did not report her. I want to be clear that I thought about this at length and with the rigor that my training makes difficult to avoid. She was an adult. She had left voluntarily. Whatever she was leaving from, she was not missing in the legal sense of the word. She was hiding, which is a right that adults have. difficult as that is for a database that lists you as suspicious circumstances missing. She left in late November. She left a note on the kitchen table that said, "Thank you," and gave me a number to call if I ever needed to reach her. I have not called it. I don't think she wants me to. What I think about sometimes, in the way that certain things embed themselves and don't let go, is August. The empty house, and a woman folding herself into the corner of an attic between two duct runs, finding a space that would hold her. Staying. My house held her. Whatever the house had that felt like the right place to be in a difficult time, it held her for months. I hope where she went is as good. I hope she found other places that hold her. I hope she is not in someone's attic right now because she is too careful and too quiet, and she deserves a room with a door she can open and close from the inside. A door she can open herself and find whatever she needs on the other side. Story 4 of 20. The elevator opened on a floor that doesn't exist. The building has 12 floors. This is documented in the building plans, in the fire escape maps posted in each corridor, and in the physical reality of a 12-story residential tower that I have lived in for 4 years. 12 floors, 12 lobby buttons in the elevator, 12 floors of apartments above the ground-level entrance lobby. Mathematics and architecture in complete agreement. The elevator opened on floor 13. My name is David Marsh. I live on the 9th floor of a building in a city I'll call the city, because the specific city doesn't matter, and I'm not interested in being visited by people who read this and want to try buttons. I am a software developer by profession, a man who thinks in systems, in logic, in the particular rigor of things that either work or don't. I don't have a framework for what I'm going to describe. I've spent 4 years building one and haven't finished. It happened on a Wednesday night in March, around 11 p.m. I was returning from a late dinner, carrying a bag, slightly preoccupied. I got in the elevator on the ground floor and pressed 9. Standard. The elevator went up. I have ridden this elevator perhaps 1,000 times. I know its particular acceleration, the floor count I can do by feel, the slight pause at each floor's arrival, the brief moment of equilibrium before the next movement. I know 9 floors. I know when I should stop. I didn't stop at 9. The elevator kept going. I looked at the panel. The 9 button was lit. The elevator passed what should have been 9 and continued upward. I pressed the door open button. Nothing. Pressed lobby. Nothing. Pressed several other buttons with increasing urgency. The elevator continued up. It stopped. The doors opened. The floor I was looking at was not any floor of my building. I mean this literally. The corridor was different in its proportions, in its lighting, in the material of its walls and floor. My building has carpeted corridors with cream-colored walls and fluorescent lighting under diffuser panels. This corridor had a dark hardwood floor, wallpaper, actual wallpaper, a dark pattern that I couldn't immediately identify, and sconce lighting, the warm, individual fixtures that you'd expect in a hotel of a certain era rather than a modern apartment building. I looked at the floor indicator. The panel showed the number 13. I looked at the corridor. It extended in both directions, curving slightly as it went, which my building's corridors do not do. They are straight, end to end, 4 apartments per side. This corridor curved, and in both directions I could see doors, 8 of them visible in the stretch I could see, which was longer than a floor of my building. The air was different. Not dramatically the same indoor temperature, roughly, slightly drier, but carrying a smell I hadn't encountered in the building before. Paper, old paper, and under it, something else I couldn't name. I did not step out. I stood at the edge of the open elevator with my grocery bag, and looked at the 13th floor of a 12-story building and thought about what I was seeing. The doors began to close. I held them open and stood there at the threshold and looked. One of the doors in the corridor opened. A man came out. Middle-aged, ordinary-looking, in a dress shirt and slacks. The kind of unremarkable person you would not notice twice. He stepped into the corridor and turned toward me. He saw me. He stopped. We looked at each other across approximately 20 feet of impossible corridor. "Wrong floor?" he said. Not as a question. Not unkindly. The way you'd say it to a neighbor who'd pressed the wrong button. "What floor is this?" I said. He looked at me steadily. 13, he said. "Yours is 9. "How do you know?" "Press 9, he said. "Go home." I pressed 9. The doors closed. The elevator descended. I felt it pass what should have been the 13th floor and counted down to 9. And the doors opened onto my correct corridor with its carpet and cream walls and fluorescent lighting, and I walked to my apartment and put my groceries away, and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I have told 3 people this story. All 3 have the same initial response. The building has a basement or a mezzanine that functions as an additional level, and the elevator numbering is inconsistent. I have checked this rigorously. The building has no basement residential level. The ground floor is the lobby. Floors 1 through 12 are residential. The elevator has 12 numbered buttons plus lobby. The building is 12 stories. This is not a numbering anomaly. I have pressed the 9 button perhaps 200 times since that night. The elevator has delivered me to floor 9 every single time without deviation. I have, twice, ridden the elevator without pressing any button, after 11 p.m., standing in the center of the elevator with my arms at my sides and my eyes on the panel. Both times, the elevator delivered me to 9. The 13th floor has not appeared again. I don't know what it would take to find it. I don't know if I want to find it. The man in the corridor knew my floor. He knew I belonged on 9. He sent me home with the tone of someone managing a small misunderstanding, not threatening, not alarmed, not curious, matter of fact. As if people arrived at 13 occasionally and were redirected. As if 13 was a place that existed, occupied, functional, with people going in and out of their apartments at 11 p.m. on Wednesday nights in March. As if 13 was just another floor. One the building knew about, and the fire maps didn't show, and the lobby panel didn't include, and nobody I've spoken to has ever been to or heard of. Just a floor. Going up past 12, where a man in a dress shirt tells you, "Wrong floor, yours is 9, and you press 9, and you go home. And you sit at your kitchen table and wonder if the man on 13 ever presses a button that doesn't exist for him. And where he goes. Story 5 of 20. Someone kept leaving food outside my bedroom door. I want to start with what I know about my apartment, because my apartment is mine and I know it well. I have lived there for 6 years. I know the sound of every pipe and every floorboard. I know which cabinet door swings back if you don't close it firmly, and which window sticks in August and where the draft comes from in January. I live alone. I have lived alone in that apartment for all 6 years. There is no other person with a key. The building has a coded lobby entry that I have not shared with anyone, and the deadbolt on my door, which I lock every night, requires a physical key that I possess and that has no duplicate in the world except the building manager's emergency copy. I tell you all of this so that you understand that when I say, I do not know who left the food, I mean, I genuinely do not know. And I have examined all the ordinary explanations, and they do not hold. My name is Rachel Kim. The food started appearing in February. The first morning, I opened my bedroom door and I nearly stepped on a plate. Scrambled eggs, slightly cooled, with toast and a small glass of orange juice, arranged neatly on the floor directly in front of my door. My first thought was that I had sleepwalked. I have no history of sleepwalking. I examined this possibility seriously, looked up sleepwalking behavior, considered whether stress or medication changes could trigger it. I examined my kitchen. The pan I would have used was in the cabinet, dry, unused. The eggs in my refrigerator were not reduced in number. I had not made these eggs. I ate them anyway, because I was hungry and they were eggs, and the absurdity of throwing away a perfectly good breakfast in my own apartment felt like a capitulation to irrationality. They were good eggs, well seasoned, slightly more butter than I use. The second morning, oatmeal, honey and brown sugar, a side of sliced banana. Again, directly outside the bedroom door, arranged with a consideration that suggests the person arranging it cared about presentation. Again, my kitchen showed no evidence of its preparation. Third morning, nothing. I felt, irrationally, slightly disappointed. Fourth morning, French toast. This is not something I make for myself. I don't dislike French toast, but it wouldn't occur to me to make it on a weekday. It was very good. I installed a camera. A small security camera pointed at my bedroom door from the hallway, positioned so it would capture the full corridor from bedroom to kitchen. I reviewed the footage the morning after the first food appearance following the camera's installation. The footage showed my hallway. Empty. Dark, because the hallway light was off, and I had not thought to leave it on. But the camera had night vision, and the footage was interpretable. At 4:47 a.m., there was something. I have watched this footage many times, and I am going to describe it as carefully as I can. The footage showed what might be described as a visual disturbance, not a person, not an animal, but a disruption in the visual field. As if the camera's night vision was struggling with something that had a different relationship to light than solid objects do. In the area just outside my bedroom door, the footage showed approximately 90 seconds of this disturbance. Then the disturbance resolved. In the following frame, there was a plate on the floor. I watched 90 seconds of something leaving food outside my door. I cannot tell you what the something was. The camera could not tell me what the something was. I tried leaving a note. I taped it to my bedroom door. "Who are you?" It was gone in the morning. In its place, a bowl of congee with ginger and a soft-boiled egg and a folded piece of paper. The paper said, "Someone who worries." I tried writing back. I put a note on the door. "What do you worry about?" The next morning, crepes with lemon and powdered sugar and a note. "You don't eat enough. I cannot dispute this. I was going through a difficult period, a bad breakup, work stress, the particular neglect of self that those things produce. I had been eating badly and not regularly." I wrote, "How do you know that?" The response, the following morning, accompanied by a full breakfast with fresh squeezed juice. I have always known. I've been worried for a while. I wrote, "How long?" No note in response. Just a very good cup of coffee, covered with a small plate to keep it warm. It has been 4 months since the food started appearing. I have not found an explanation that satisfies the camera footage and the kitchen evidence and the notes. I have a working hypothesis, not scientific, not documented, just mine, that my apartment has been occupied longer than I have occupied it, and that whatever occupied it before me has not entirely left, and that it is, in its way, domestic, housekeeping in nature, concerned with the well-being of whoever lives in the space it considers its own. I have eaten the food every morning. I leave the notes. The notes get answered in food more than in words, which feels appropriate for an entity whose primary mode of expression is apparently nourishment. I am eating better. Regularly. Varied and well-prepared meals that I did not make and cannot explain. I am not telling my friends, because there is no version of this story that does not sound like a mental health concern. I am telling you, whoever you are, because I need to tell someone. Someone is feeding me. Someone who has been here longer than I have, who worries about whether I eat enough, who communicates in crepes and congee and fresh squeezed juice. I don't know what it is. I know that the coffee is always the right temperature and the eggs are always well seasoned, and when I write a note on my bedroom door, something reads it. I am, in the strangest way, not alone. And the aloneness of my 6 years in that apartment, which I had adjusted to and accepted and thought of as simply the condition of my life, is no longer entirely true. Something is there, something that worries. And every morning, when I open my bedroom door and nearly step on a plate of something warm and carefully made, I think, someone made this for me, and I eat it. And I am grateful. Story 6 of 20. The security camera recorded tomorrow. I work in security technology. I have worked in this field for 11 years. I know cameras, their limitations, their failure modes, their artifacts, the specific ways they can malfunction, and the specific signatures those malfunctions leave in the footage. When the cameras at my client's building began producing footage that appeared to show events that had not yet occurred, my professional first response was to find the technical explanation. I am still looking for it. 3 years later. My name is Howard Bell. I run a small security consulting firm. The building in question was a commercial facility, a mid-sized office building whose specific purpose I have been asked not to disclose. My firm had installed and was maintaining a 12-camera system covering the lobby, elevators, parking structure, and main corridors. The anomaly was first noticed by a facility manager who reviewed overnight footage and flagged a discrepancy. The camera covering the main lobby entrance, she said, showed footage that didn't match the building's activity logs. She was specifically referring to footage from camera 1, the primary lobby entrance, time-stamped 2 a.m. on a Thursday. The footage showed activity at 2 a.m. that the access logs recorded as happening at 2 p.m. 10 hours off. My first response was clock sync error. The camera's internal clock had drifted, a common and mundane issue. I scheduled a maintenance visit. When I reviewed the footage myself, I noticed something that the facility manager had not. The footage was not from the previous 2 a.m. It was from the following 2 p.m. This distinction took me several hours to confirm, and I want to explain how I confirmed it, because it matters. The lobby footage at 2 a.m. showed 12 people entering and exiting the building over a 3-hour period. I cross-referenced each person against the access control logs, the card swipes and fob readings that create a record of who enters and exits. The 12 people I could identify in the footage matched the access logs for the following day's 2 p.m. period exactly. Not approximately, exactly. 12 people, in the same order, with the same entry and exit pattern, down to the direction they turned when they entered the lobby. The camera had recorded the following day's 2 p.m. as that night's 2 a.m. I documented this and said nothing while I tried to understand it. I reviewed the remaining 11 cameras. 8 of them were normal, current footage, time accurate, matching the access logs for their recorded periods. 3 of them were showing future footage. Camera 4, in the parking structure, was running approximately 36 hours ahead. Camera 7, covering the east corridor, was approximately 4 hours ahead. Camera 1, the lobby, was exactly 10 hours ahead. No consistent offset. No technical failure mode that produces different time offsets on different cameras in the same system. I know of no hardware fault, no software glitch, no network synchronization error that produces forward time footage. Forward time footage is not a failure mode because it is not possible. The footage being recorded was real people, real events, cross-checked against subsequent access logs. It was not fabricated footage. It was accurate documentation of events that had not yet occurred at the time of recording. I confirmed this over 6 weeks of careful observation. I would review Camera One's footage from the previous night, note the events shown, and then watch the building during the following day. Everything Camera One had shown would happen, in the same order, with the same people, with the same movements. The camera was showing me tomorrow. I told no one for 6 weeks. This was professionally irresponsible. And I am aware of that. I told no one because there was no version of this disclosure that did not involve me saying things that would be career-ending, and because I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I described it to anyone who might act on it. In week 7, I did something I have spent time since examining. I watched Camera One's footage from the overnight period, which showed the following day's 2 p.m. activity. And I saw something happen in the lobby that I categorized as significant. A person fell. Not dramatically, they slipped at the lobby entrance, went down hard, and spent approximately 30 seconds on the floor before being helped up by 2 others. A fall that looked like it could result in an injury. I noted the timestamp in the footage. The event would occur, by my calculations, at 2:17 p.m. the following day. At 2:15 p.m., I placed a call to the facility manager. I told her there was a loose mat at the lobby entrance that was creating a slip hazard and should be secured immediately. She did not ask me how I knew. She had it addressed before 2:17 p.m. At 2:17 p.m., a person entered the lobby, approached the spot where the mat had been, and because the mat was now secured, did not fall. I had used the camera's future footage to prevent something. I don't know how to categorize this. I am a security professional. I document, I analyze, I report. I don't intervene based on footage that technically should not exist and cannot be explained. I reported the camera anomaly eventually. I described it as a time-stamping error with an unusual signature. The manufacturer's engineers examined the system and found no fault they could identify. The cameras were eventually replaced. The replacement cameras are normal. They record the present, as cameras do. I still have the 6 weeks of footage from Camera One and the correlation logs I built to cross-check it. Stored offline, not networked. In the footage, tomorrow. Ordinary tomorrow. People going to work, going home, moving through a lobby. But 10 hours early. Quietly, without drama, without announcement. The camera just knew. I think about what else in the world knows things early. What other systems, built by human hands or otherwise, receive tomorrow before it arrives. I check security footage more carefully than I used to. I look at timestamps. I look for the small offness, the slight discrepancy, the footage that shows people you haven't seen yet. I haven't found it again. But I look. Because once you know a camera can record tomorrow, you can't look at footage the same way. You can't entirely trust that what you're seeing has already happened. Story 7 of 20. The forest returned. Everything it took. Except one person. There is a forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that has taken things. I know this because I have spoken to 7 people who have lost something in it. And because I am one of those 7 people. And because for 3 years I have been following the returns, the specific, inexplicable returns of objects that had been lost in the forest for months or years, and tracking the one absence in an otherwise complete pattern. My name is Thomas Gray. I am a former park ranger currently writing about the natural world in ways that my former colleagues find irregular. The forest I am referring to is a stretch of mixed hardwood and conifer in Marquette County. It is not a named wilderness area. It is simply the forest that the locals in two nearby small communities refer to by a name that translates roughly to the returning forest, which should have told me something before I spent 18 months working in it. I lost my father's watch in the forest in the autumn of 2019. A pocket watch, silver, a 1940s railroad watch that had been my father's and his father's before him. I lost it on a trail section I have walked dozens of times, in conditions that should not have permitted its loss. I was wearing it on a chain in my breast pocket. The chain was intact when I reached the trailhead, and the watch was not there. 3 hours of searching the trail produced nothing. 14 months later, the watch was on my front porch, in a small wooden box I did not recognize. The box had no markings, no note. The watch was inside, in perfect condition, wound and running correctly. I started asking around. I knew the area, I knew the communities, I knew who to ask. I found 6 other people who had lost objects in that section of forest and had received them back on their porches in wooden boxes without explanation after periods ranging from 6 weeks to 2 years. A child's shoe, a set of car keys, a journal, a camera with an intact memory card, a pair of binoculars, a dog's collar. I confirmed each one. I spoke to each person. All of them had found the returned object on their porch in a wooden box within the previous 3 years. All of the objects had been returned, except one. Margaret Cole went into the forest on the 15th of June, 2018, to look for her dog, which had run off the trail. She was an experienced hiker, a woman who had lived near that forest for 30 years and knew it in all its seasons. She did not come back. The search was thorough. County search and rescue, volunteer searchers, dogs. Nothing. Margaret Cole's disappearance remained unexplained and remains, officially, an open missing persons case. Her dog came home 2 days after she disappeared, unharmed, well-fed, its collar intact. It waited on her front porch, which is a thing that dogs do. I spoke to her daughter, Emma, who now lives in the house. Emma told me that she had been watching for a wooden box on the porch since she learned about the pattern. 2 years of watching. Nothing. The forest has returned everything it took from those 6 other people. Keys, cameras, journals, a child's shoe. It has not returned Margaret Cole. I have gone back into the forest many times since I identified the pattern. I walk the trail section where Margaret was last seen. I look at the trees, the underbrush, the particular quality of light in that part of the forest, which has, and I say this as a former ranger who has spent years learning to read forests, a quality of attention, a quality of being present in a way that forests usually are not. Most forests are ecosystems. This part of this forest feels like an ecosystem that is also doing something else. Paying attention, processing. I have found no trace of Margaret, nor has anyone else. My theory, which I hold loosely and without confidence. The forest takes things by accident. Objects fall from pockets, get left on trails, get separated from their owners in the ordinary way of things lost in wilderness. And the forest, whatever the forest is doing when it is doing the other thing, the paying attention thing, finds them and eventually returns them. It cannot return Margaret because Margaret is not an object. Because whatever took her is not the same mechanism that takes car keys and pocket watches. Because she went in looking for her dog, which was already found and home. And whatever she found instead is something that doesn't get packed in a wooden box and left on a porch. Or, and this is the other theory, the darker one, the one I think about at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. The forest is still working on it. The watches and cameras came back in weeks or months. Maybe some things take longer. Maybe some things require the forest to work harder at the returning. Maybe Emma Cole will wake up one morning and find a wooden box on the front porch. And inside it, something of her mother's, something that was kept well in the dark and the quiet of whatever keeping the forest does. Something returned in the end, like everything else. I walk the trail, I look at the trees, I watch for boxes on porches. The forest is patient. I am trying to be. Story 8 of 20. My reflection started living without me. I want to be medically rigorous about this. I want you to know that I have been evaluated. I have seen a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and an ophthalmologist. I have had an MRI, a visual field test, and several conversations with professionals who specialize in perceptual disorders. The medical consensus is that I am physiologically normal, and that what I am experiencing does not correspond to any documented neurological condition. I am telling you this not to preempt skepticism, but because the medical evaluations are part of the record, and the record matters. My name is Sarah Vance. I am 34 years old, a high school English teacher, a person without a history of mental illness or perceptual disturbance. What I am about to describe has been occurring for 8 months. My reflection is not doing what I do. I want to be precise about when this departs from the ordinary. Reflections that are slightly delayed, that don't quite match. These are experiences that have explanations, and I am not describing those. What I am describing is a reflection that performs different actions from the ones I am performing, in real time, in the same mirror. The first instance, I was brushing my teeth. I looked up at the bathroom mirror. My reflection was not brushing its teeth. It was looking at me directly, without the slight offset of eyes meeting in mirror that is the normal experience. Looking directly, as if the eyes in the mirror were not reflected but oriented. The toothbrush in its hand was at its side. I stopped moving. My reflection stopped too. I raised my right hand. My reflection raised its left, the correct mirror response. Normal. I went back to brushing. My reflection went back to looking at me. I stepped out of the bathroom. I counted to 5. I stepped back in. My reflection was brushing its teeth. I have spent 8 months in a very specific kind of relationship with my own mirrors. I have learned certain things from this relationship. The reflection is not consistent in its divergence, most of the time, perhaps 90% of the time. It does exactly what I do. It is in the remaining 10% that it does other things. What things? It stands when I sit. It looks at the window when I look at the floor. It adjusts its hair when I have not moved my hands. Once, in the hallway mirror, it was walking away from me, walking away from the mirror, into the reflected depth of the reflected hallway. While I stood still, I watched it walk until it was too small to see clearly, and then it was not there. And then I looked away, and when I looked back, it was normal. I have tried to communicate with it. I have stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said things. Most of the time, my reflection moves its lips when I move mine, and I cannot determine whether it is saying the same thing or not. Once, I am certain of this. It spoke before I did. I was standing at the mirror at about 10 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, working up to saying something, and my reflection spoke first. I could not hear what it said. I watched it speak, and then I said what I had been going to say, and my reflection continued to speak for approximately 3 seconds after I had stopped. I have covered most of the mirrors in my apartment. Not all. I left the bathroom mirror because avoiding it entirely felt like a concession I wasn't ready to make. I check in with it every morning. Most mornings, normal. Some mornings, it looks at me while I look at it, and neither of us speaks. What I have developed over 8 months is a theory. It is not a medical theory or a scientific theory. It is a theory about identity and about what reflections are. We think of a reflection as a copy. It isn't. A reflection is what the mirror makes of you. Your image processed through a surface and returned. The reflection is made of light and physics, not of you. It is the mirror's interpretation. Most interpretations are faithful. Most of the time, the mirror makes a perfect copy. But the reflection has been, in some sense, making itself for a long time. Every time you look in a mirror, the reflection is there. It has been there, in one mirror or another, for as long as you have been alive. It has accumulated whatever accumulates in a copy when the copy is made often enough and watched closely enough. Maybe, at some point, the copy starts to diverge. Not dramatically, not completely, just in small ways. Standing when you sit, adjusting its hair when you haven't moved, looking at you while you look at it, living, a little, on its own. I don't know if this is what has happened. I don't know if it's frightening or fascinating or both. I only know what the mirror shows me, mostly me, doing what I do, being my reflection in the ordinary way. And sometimes something that is almost me, but not quite, doing something almost mine, but different, in the small hours of a Tuesday when the light is low and the bathroom is quiet. Living, a little, without me. Story 9 of 20. The house across the street was watching me. I moved to the neighborhood in April, which is the best time of year to move somewhere new. Everything is opening up. The light is lengthening. The world has that quality of possibility that spring provides, and that it immediately begins withdrawing as summer arrives. I was optimistic. I am a person who makes decisions and commits to them, and the house on Callaway Street was a good decision by most measures. The house across the street was not a good variable. My name is Ben Forrester. I am an architect, which I mention because it is professionally relevant. I look at buildings, I look at them carefully, with the training of a person whose work requires understanding how structures express themselves, the way a building's proportions signal its era and purpose, the way windows function as both eyes and signaling devices, the particular grammar of facades that architects spend years learning to read. I read the house across the street, and it was reading me back. This is not a metaphor. I understand that it sounds like one. An architect says a building is watching him, and you think, projection, professional habit, the pathetic fallacy. Buildings don't watch. They express, they signal, they organize space and light, but they don't watch. Let me be specific. The house is a 2-story colonial, probably from the 1970s, in good repair. Beige siding, 2 front-facing windows on the upper floor and 3 on the lower, a covered front porch. Normal, unremarkable. In my first week on Callaway Street, I noticed that the curtains in the upper right window were always parted in the same way. The same inch-wide gap, precisely centered, at all hours of the day and night. This is not unusual. A curtain can stay parted. But the parting moved. Not dramatically, not swinging open or billowing. The gap shifted. Day to day, or within a day, the parting of those curtains was at a different position. Sometimes centered, sometimes left, sometimes right. And the position of the gap corresponded, and this is what I am going to have difficulty conveying without sounding like a man who is fixated on his neighbor's window. It corresponded to where I was in my own house. when I worked at my desk by the front window, gap centered on my desk. When I cooked in the kitchen, visible through the kitchen window on the side of my house, gap shifted right toward my kitchen. When I was visible in my second-floor bedroom window, gap shifted upward and right. The curtain was tracking me. I documented this over 3 weeks. I am an architect, and I document things. I have the photographs, I have the notes with timestamps, I have the correlation table I built between my location in my house and the gap position in that window across the street. The correlation was not perfect, maybe 70%, but it was far above chance, and it was consistent. I spoke to my neighbor on the right, a woman named Diane who had lived on Callaway Street for 11 years. I asked her about the house across the street. She went quiet in a particular way. "Do you know who lives there?" I said. "It's been empty for 3 years," she said. "Old woman lived there before. She died." She looked at the house. "Her family maintains it, keeps it up from a distance. Nobody's moved in." "Empty," I said. "Has been," she said. That night, at 11 p.m., I looked at the house from my front window. The upper right window's curtains, gap centered. I was at my front window. The gap was centered on my front window. In the lower right window, on the first floor, a light. On for perhaps 30 seconds, then off. On again for 10 seconds. Off. I went to the front door. I opened it and stood on my porch and looked at the house directly. The lower window light was on, steady now. And in the curtain gap in the upper window, a shape. Not a person, not the distinct shape of a face or a figure. A presence behind the curtain, something that displaced the fabric slightly, that altered the quality of the gap. Something that was looking out. I went back inside. I closed my door. I sat with my back to the wall that faces the street and thought about an empty house whose curtain gap tracked my movements through my own home and whose windows lit up when I came outside. Diane had more to tell me over coffee the following week. The old woman who had lived there, her name had been Frances, she said, had been reclusive in her later years. Rarely came out. Watched the street from her windows, Diane thought. It had made some neighbors uncomfortable, the degree of attention Frances had paid to the street from behind her curtains. Frances had died 3 years ago. The house had been empty since. The curtains in the upper window still moved. The gap still followed me around my house. I asked Diane if anyone else on the street had noticed anything about the empty house. She was quiet. Then, the Hendersons moved last fall. Said they felt watched. She wrapped her hands around her mug. And the family before them, same thing. Same thing. The house across the street, empty with no one in it. Watched. Tracked. Lit its windows at night when residents came to their doors. What Frances did in her final years. Watching the street from behind her curtains, paying close, continuous attention to the neighborhood, to the people in it, to the lives happening across the street. I think she did it long enough and completely enough that it became a property of the house. Some habits outlast the people who have them. Some attention becomes architectural. Some houses keep watching after the watcher is gone. I've gotten used to it. The curtain gap moves. The windows are lit sometimes when I come outside. I've started thinking of it as a kind of neighborhood watch, something keeping an eye on Callaway Street the only way it still can. I wave at the upper window sometimes. The gap doesn't shift when I do, but I think Frances sees it. I think she's glad someone finally acknowledged her. Story 10 of 20. Every time I fell asleep, someone moved my furniture. Let me establish the baseline. I am a light sleeper who lives alone in a second-floor apartment with a dead-bolted door and windows that I lock every night without exception. I have no history of parasomnia. I have no history of sleepwalking. I keep my apartment very specifically organized because I work from home in a small space. And organization is the difference between functional and chaotic. And I know where everything is with the precision of a person who depends on that knowledge. I know where my furniture is. I knew where it was each night when I fell asleep. And I knew every morning for 6 weeks last autumn that it was no longer where I had left it. My name is Claire Morgan. I will describe the changes in order as I documented them. Night 1. I woke to find my desk chair had been moved from behind my desk to the center of the room, facing the window. The distance was perhaps 4 feet. The chair is heavy, a proper ergonomic chair with a weighted base. Moving it requires effort. Night 2. The small bookshelf on the east wall had been turned 90 degrees. Its books were in the same order. It was now facing south. Night 3. Nothing. I checked everything carefully. Nothing had been moved. Night 4. The kitchen table had been moved 8 inches to the left. Exactly 8 inches I measured, because I am that person. The table is not heavy, but the 4 chairs around it were undisturbed, which requires moving the table without disturbing the chairs. Night 5. My bed. I want to dwell on this one. Because waking to find your bed in a different position while you are in it is an experience for which I do not have good language. I woke at my usual time, reached for my phone on the nightstand, found that the nightstand was not where I expected it. The bed had been moved, rotated, very slightly, perhaps 15 degrees from its usual position against the wall. My head was no longer pointing north. Small difference, enough to make every reach for every familiar thing go slightly wrong. I set up cameras after night 5. 3 of them: bedroom, living room, kitchen, night vision, full coverage. I reviewed the footage from night 6, during which nothing was moved. I reviewed the footage from night 7. At 3:22 a.m., the desk chair in the living room moved. In the camera footage, the chair moved smoothly, a slow rotation toward the window. There was nothing visible moving it. No person, no mechanism, no visible force. The chair rotated on its base and settled, and was still. The footage from nights 8, 9, and 10 showed similar events. Furniture moving without a mover, at hours between 2 and 4 a.m. Slowly and with apparent purpose. I say apparent purpose because the rearrangements were not random. I realized this around week 4 of the documentation. The furniture was being rearranged according to a logic. The desk chair moving to face the window. The bookshelf rotating toward the south. The table shifting to improve traffic flow through the kitchen. The bed rotating to take better advantage of the morning light. The apartment was being optimized. I am not an interior designer. I arranged my apartment quickly when I moved in, functionally, without attention to light or flow or the subtler considerations of how a space can be arranged to serve the person in it. Whatever was rearranging my furniture at 3 a.m. was making better choices than I had made. By week 6, my apartment was better. I recognize this with the frustration of a person who has been improved without being asked. The desk chair facing the window meant I could look up from work at a view rather than a wall. The bookshelf's new orientation made the titles easier to read in the room's natural light. The bed's new angle meant I woke to sunlight rather than shadow. It was, objectively, a more livable apartment. I left a note, the way I've heard of other people in these situations, leaving notes. On the kitchen table, in clear view, "Who are you, and why are you moving my furniture?" In the morning, no note in response. But the kitchen table had been moved back to its original position. I wrote, "Please put it back." It was better where you moved it. In the morning, the table was in the optimized position. The furniture moving stopped after week 6. Everything stayed where it had been moved to. My apartment has been still at night for 4 months. I have made one additional change in the interim. I rearranged the spare room, which my invisible furniture mover had not addressed. I did it deliberately badly. Desk facing the wall, chair in the corner, bookshelf blocking the window. I woke the following morning to find it done correctly. Desk at an angle for the best light, chair accessible, bookshelf moved to not block the window. I think my apartment has had a better designer than me working in it. I think this designer works at 3 a.m. when I am asleep and the space can be assessed without my interference. I think the designer has now finished, for now, has gotten the apartment into the shape it considers correct. I am living in someone else's vision of my apartment. A vision that is, I have to admit, better than mine. I've stopped fighting it. I've started studying it instead. The choices made, the logic applied, the way the space has been organized to serve the person who uses it. I am learning a great deal about interior arrangement from an entity I have never seen. Working at 3 a.m., with furniture it has no hands to move. I am taking notes. I am grateful. In the strained way, you are grateful for a lesson you didn't ask for. That the teacher knew what I needed. The voice inside, my smoke detector, knew my name. The smoke detector began chirping in February, which is the time of year when batteries die, the cold draws them down, and suddenly every device in your home that requires a battery begins registering its objection simultaneously. I registered the chirp mentally as a task for the weekend and continued with my week. On Thursday night, the smoke detector did not chirp. It spoke. My name is Joseph Ellis. I am a 51-year-old accountant, a person whose professional life is built on the assumption that numbers behave according to rules and that exceptions to those rules have explanations. I am not imaginative in the direction of the supernatural. I do not seek strange experiences. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what I heard was not filtered through any predisposition toward the uncanny. The smoke detector is in the hallway, mounted to the ceiling. Standard 9-volt battery-operated unit, about 3 years old. It chirped at 11 p.m. on Thursday, one chirp, the battery warning pattern, and then, in the silence after the chirp, in the small acoustic space that a hallway has, I heard, Joseph. Not from the television, not from outside, from the hallway ceiling, from the direction of the smoke detector. I am an accountant. My response to unexplained data is to verify it, then verify it again. I stood in the hallway for 2 minutes. Silence. I went back to my living room and sat down. 30 seconds later, the chirp. And in the silence after the chirp, Joseph again. Same voice. Quiet, level. The voice of someone who is not sure they're being heard and is trying not to startle. I went back to the hallway. I looked at the smoke detector. I said loudly, feeling fully ridiculous, "Who is there?" Silence. Then, the chirp pattern. Not one chirp, but 2. The different pattern. And in the silence following the second chirp, so quiet I might have missed it. I am here. I pulled a chair from the kitchen. I stood on the chair in the hallway and put my ear close to the smoke detector. It chirped. Close up, the chirp was louder and more complex than it sounds from a distance, a frequency-rich sound. And when it resolved, "Joseph, are you listening?" "Yes," I said, to a smoke detector, in my hallway, at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. The voice did not come through the chirp again that night. I replaced the battery on Friday morning. The detector stopped chirping. On Friday night, with the new battery, one chirp at midnight, And in the silence, I can hear better now. I have had the smoke detector for 3 years. The voice has been in it since February, and I don't know how long before that. A smoke detector with a voice that knows my name and comments on battery quality is not something I have a framework for. But I am an accountant, and so I built a ledger. What the voice has said, over 3 months. My name, various times. Asking if I'm listening. That it can hear better now, after the new battery. That it is worried about something in the building's wiring. This proved accurate, as an electrician found a potential issue 2 weeks after the voice mentioned it. That I should call my sister. I called my sister, and she was, in fact, having a very bad week. That the winter was ending. That it is glad I'm here. This last one came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, not at night, in daylight. A single chirp, and then the words so clear that I stopped what I was doing and stood still in the hallway for a moment. I am glad you are here. I said, I'm glad I'm here too. Then I stood in my hallway feeling the specific social awkwardness of someone who has just had a genuine exchange with their smoke detector. I have not replaced the detector. I should. It is 3 years old and due for replacement. I have not. I don't know what the voice is. I have 3 hypotheses that I rotate between. A previous tenant whose death in this apartment went unrecorded, and whose presence has found the only electronic medium available to it. Something that finds the specific frequency of a smoke detector's chirp a usable channel, or something I have no category for at all. The practical information has been accurate. The wiring warning, which I acted on. The sister call, which mattered. These are things that a voice from a smoke detector should not know and did. And the last thing, the gladness that I am there, is the thing I think about most, not as alarming, as something else. As the particular comfort of being known by something in the space you live in, of having a presence in your home that is aware of you and finds your presence good. I live alone. I work alone. I am not a person who lacks for things to do, but I am a person who comes home to an empty apartment and experiences the particular quality of that emptiness as simply the condition of my life. My smoke detector knows my name. My smoke detector is glad I'm here. I don't have a framework for what this is. But when the chirp comes in the night and the voice says my name in the hallway dark, I say, I'm here, I'm listening. And it says, I know. And I go back to bed. And I am less alone than I was. Story 12 of 20. The library had a book about my death. I have spent a great deal of time thinking about the question of whether a book about your death is better or worse than not knowing. I have come down, over the 2 years since I found it, in an uncomfortable middle position. The finding was terrible, and the knowing is terrible, and I would not, if I could reach back, choose to have read it. But I cannot unread it, and so the question is academic. My name is Ann Rossi. I am a librarian. The professional dimension of this account is not incidental. I know libraries, I know catalogs, I know the physical and organizational logic of how books exist in library systems. I know what a properly cataloged book looks like, and I know what a catalog anomaly looks like. What I found in the Central Branch on a Tuesday in March was not a catalog anomaly, which is the part I cannot resolve. I was working a closing shift. The branch closes at 8, and the period from 7 to close is a gradual winding down, patrons thinning out, the building quieting, the particular late shift routine of shelving and resetting that I have done hundreds of times. I was pushing a returns cart through the biography section when the spine caught my eye. The spine had my name. Not my name as an author, Rossi, Anne, in the standard last first format of the subject catalog. My name as a subject. Rossi, Anne, the name above the title on the spine, indicating the person the book was about. I stopped the cart. I looked at the book. I pulled it from the shelf. It was a standard hardcover biography, or had the appearance of one. The kind of solid, moderately sized volume that a library biography section is full of. The cover had a black and white photograph of a woman I did not immediately recognize. Though recognition came a moment later in the way recognition of your own image in an unexpected context takes time. The woman in the photograph was me, approximately my current age, which placed the photograph as recent. But I had no memory of having it taken. I am going to describe what I did next precisely, because the sequence matters. I did not open the book immediately. I looked at the spine, the cover, the back cover, which had a brief description in the style of a biography's back cover text, summarizing the subject's life and significance. The back cover did not tell me how I died. It told me what my life had amounted to, in the retrospective language of biography. And I am not going to reproduce that here, because it is mine. Then I opened the book. I did not read it. I want to be honest about this. I tried to read it and found, very quickly, that my eyes would not cooperate. That reading one's own biography in a book that is physically present in the library where you work is not something the mind processes in any linear way. I got through the first page and a half, and then I closed it. The page and a half I read was accurate. The specifics of my childhood, my family, my path to librarianship, accurate. Not publicly available information, not the kind of thing that a biographical compilation from published sources would contain. Personal, accurate, mine. I checked the catalog. No record of the book in the system, no ISBN, no acquisition record, no catalog entry. The book existed on the shelf, but not in the library's records. I checked the spine label, the Dewey Decimal Call number on the sticker. The number was in the biography range, but, when I cross-referenced it, belonged to a book about someone else. The physical label was wrong, or the system was wrong, or both. I took the book home. I did not check it out, because it was not in the system, and I did not know how to check out a book that did not officially exist. I have read 7 more pages since bringing it home. 7 pages in 2 years. I read a page or two and then close it and do not open it again for weeks. I am not reading it in order. I flip to sections and read a page and close it again. I am getting the book in fragments. What I have read, accurate, specific, mine. My professional life, my relationships, my mistakes. The book is not flattering, but it is not cruel. It has the tone of a biography that is attempting fairness, that sees its subject clearly and without the desire to diminish. There is a chapter near the end that I've looked at once, briefly, before closing the book immediately. The chapter is titled, "The Manner of It." I have not read it. I am not going to read it. I have decided, in the way that decisions get made when there is no good option, that knowing the shape of my death in advance is not a gift, but a weight, and that I will carry enough weight in the time remaining without adding that one. The book is in my closet, on the upper shelf, behind some other things. I know it's there every day. I think about it every day. I am a librarian who has a book she will not read. I don't know where it came from. I don't know whose biography section it belongs to, or whose catalog has it, or who compiled it, or who authorized its existence. I don't know if all of us have one somewhere, a volume in some library waiting on some shelf. I know the chapter titled, "The Manner of It" exists, and that it is waiting. I am not ready. I am not going to be ready. and the book will wait, patient as libraries are patient. For the day, it becomes the only record. Story 13 of 20. I answered a phone call from myself. The call came in at 7:14 p.m. on a Friday. I know the exact time because I looked at the phone before I answered, a reflex. And the time was 7:14, and the name on the screen was my own. My name is Eric Walsh. I am a systems analyst by profession. My name on the screen of my own phone, calling my own phone, is a technological impossibility of a specific and well-understood kind. A phone cannot call itself. The number that called me was my own mobile number, which I verified after the call by checking my recent calls list. My number had called me. I answered. There was a sound that I am going to describe, for lack of better language, as distance. The specific quality of a connection that has traveled a long way, not degraded, not static heavy, but with a depth to the silence between words that suggests the signal has covered ground. Then my own voice. I am going to note that hearing your own voice from a phone is a strange experience under any circumstances. We don't hear ourselves as others hear us. And a recording or call transmission emphasizes the gap between self-perception and acoustic reality. I recognize the voice as mine the way you recognize a photograph of yourself. With a slight dissociation, a moment of adjustment before the recognition settles. The voice said, "You need to listen carefully. I don't know how long this connection holds." I said, "Who is this?" I know how that sounds. I knew who it was. I asked anyway because I had not yet caught up. The voice said, "It's you. It's Eric." I know that's not helpful, but I don't have time to establish it. There's something I need to tell you. I sat down. I was standing in my kitchen, and I sat down on the floor of my kitchen, which is not something I do, but my legs made the decision for me. I said, "Okay." What followed was a conversation of approximately 6 minutes. I have written down everything I remember of it. I am not going to reproduce the full content here because parts of it are personal in a way that is mine and not for publication, and because one part of it involves information that I have been told, by the voice that is me, not to make widely known. What I will tell you, the voice told me something that was going to happen. A specific event, timed with specifics I could verify. The event involved someone I care about and a decision they were going to make, and a way in which I could, if I acted, affect the outcome. I acted. The event occurred as described. The outcome was affected as the voice said it could be. I am not going to tell you whether the outcome was good or prevented bad, because those are categories that apply differently depending on your position in the situation. And I am not in a position to characterize other people's experiences. What I will tell you, the event was real. The call was real. The outcome was real. I asked the voice myself. One question before the call dropped. "When are you calling from?" A pause. Then, "I don't know exactly." Later, "Further." "How much further?" "I'm not sure the math translates," the voice said. And then, "You'll figure out that the math doesn't matter. That's something I can tell you." The call dropped. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. Then I made the call I needed to make to the person I needed to call, and I said what I had been told to say. Then I sat with the fact of what had happened and tried to think about it rigorously. I am a systems analyst. I think about information, about how it moves, about what can travel and what cannot and under what conditions. I know that information about the future cannot travel backward in time under any currently understood physical framework. I know that a phone cannot call itself. I know that a voice cannot be both the person speaking and the person on the other end of the call simultaneously. I know all of these things, and I also know what happened. The math doesn't matter, the voice said. I am trying to learn what that means. I think it means that whatever the mechanism was, whatever allowed a call to cross from later to now, the mechanism is not mine to understand. The information arrived. The information was used. The outcome occurred. The math doesn't matter. What matters is that I answered. What matters is that I listened. I have wondered since whether the version of me who made that call knew, before he made it, that I would answer. Whether there's a version of this event where I didn't pick up, where I saw my own name on the screen and put the phone down. Whether the call gets made regardless, and it's only the answering that differs. I think I would answer. I think if I found myself in whatever place that call was made from, I would make it. I would trust myself to listen. I do trust myself to listen. The phone call proved it. I am trying to become the version of me who makes the call worth making. Further, later, working on it. Story 14 of 20. The neighbor never came outside. During the day, I want to be a careful witness to this, because being a careful witness is something I value. I am a retired police detective, 22 years on the job, and the habits of careful witnessing don't leave you when you leave the profession. I note things. I note when things I've noted change. I note when the change doesn't have an ordinary explanation. My name is Frank DeLuca. I moved to Sycamore Lane 3 years ago, after my wife passed. A quieter neighborhood, closer to my daughter's family, the kind of place where retirees live and lawns are kept, and the block association sends enthusiastic emails about holiday decoration contests. Normal. The neighbor in the brown house, 2 houses down, I'll call him Mr. Hale, because that's the name he gave me, though I have reasons to doubt it, which I'll get to. Moved in about 6 months after I did. I noticed his arrival the way you notice a new neighbor. A moving truck, some boxes, the particular activity of a new occupancy being established. He was pleasant when I introduced myself. 60s, tall, thin, a handshake that was correct in its firmness. He said he worked from home, that he kept irregular hours, that he hoped he wouldn't be a bother. He was not a bother. He also, in 3 years, never came outside during daylight hours. I want to be specific. I noted this by the end of the first month. He had a dog, a large, dark-colored dog that needed walking, and the dog was walked after dark. The mail was retrieved after dark. The car in his driveway, when it moved after dark and returned before dawn. I spoke to other neighbors. The Hendersons on the other side of him had noted the same thing. Wendy from across the street had assumed he was a night shift worker. The general neighborhood assessment was odd but harmless. My professional assessment, potentially relevant. I began keeping a log. The date, the time of any observed activity at the Brown house, whether that activity occurred in daylight or darkness. Over 6 months. 47 observed activities. All 47 in darkness. The most marginal was in deep winter, late afternoon, when the sky was nearly dark at 4:30 p.m. He retrieved his mail at 4:28 p.m. before complete dark, but in conditions that I would characterize as civil twilight rather than daylight. I knocked on his door one evening. He answered promptly. We talked on his porch for 20 minutes. He was engaged, intelligent, easy to talk to. I noted his porch light was behind him, and he was standing in its light, which was fine. When I asked if he'd like to get coffee sometime, he said he'd prefer evenings. I said, "You're never out during the day." He looked at me, not with alarm, with a kind of assessment that I recognized from interrogation rooms as the look of someone deciding how much to say. He said, "I have a condition, light sensitivity." Photophobia, I said. Something like that, he said. More severe. I am a retired detective. I believe people when what they say fits the observable facts, and I test the explanation against the observable facts rigorously. Photophobia is real. Severe photophobia does keep people indoors during daylight. The explanation fit. Except the kind of photophobia that keeps a person entirely indoors during all daylight hours is typically documented, typically treated, typically involves significant quality of life management. I asked my doctor about severe photophobia. She described it as a condition that is managed, that responds to tinted lenses and other interventions, that doesn't generally produce the complete diurnal absence I was observing. The kind of complete day avoidance I was documenting in Mr. Hale is not, my doctor said, consistent with any common photophobia diagnosis she was aware of. I ran his name through the resources available to a retired detective with connections. Hale is a common name. I found several people named Hale who might match the description. None matched precisely. The name felt used rather than given, which is an instinct, not a finding. Last winter, there was a power outage on Sycamore Lane. 3 days without electricity. On the second day, mid-afternoon, Mr. Hale's front door opened. He stood at the threshold, not outside in the doorway, in the shadow of the interior, with the door open. He looked at the street. He looked at the sky. He did not come out. But his face was fully visible in the diffuse gray light of an overcast February afternoon. And I was at my car, and I could see him clearly. He looked at the sky the way someone who has been away from something looks when they return to it. With recognition and with something more complicated than recognition. With loss, I think. The particular quality of a face that has given something up. He stayed in the doorway for about 5 minutes. The dog pushed past him at some point and stood on the porch and looked at the sky too, and Mr. Hale put his hand on the dog's head. Then he stepped back and closed the door. He has never come outside during daylight. He is, whatever he is, capable of existing in the dark indefinitely. He is, when the sky is overcast and the light is gray and diffuse, sometimes drawn to his doorway to look at what he is not going out into. I have given up the investigation in the sense of document gathering and record checking. There is no record to check that will tell me what Mr. Hale is. What I know, he is a good neighbor. He keeps his lawn managed at night. He waves when he sees me in the evenings. The dog is well cared for. No one on Sycamore Lane is frightened of him. Some things in the end don't need a file. Some cases you close by deciding that the thing you were investigating is not a threat to anyone and can be let alone. Mr. Hale is whatever he is. He comes out at night. The dog gets walked. He looked at the sky once in the February gray, the way a man looks at something he misses. I understand missing something. I understand looking at it from a doorway. Sometimes that's all you can do. I leave it there. Story 15 of 20. The train that never appeared on any schedule. I have loved trains since I was a child. This is relevant because it means that when I tell you I know trains, when I tell you I know schedules and routes and the particular behavior of rail systems in the specific way that enthusiasts know things, I mean it as a credential. I have ridden hundreds of routes on dozens of systems across North America and Europe. I know what a train on a published schedule looks like, and I know what a train that doesn't appear on any published schedule looks like. They look the same. That's the problem. My name is Owen Park. I am 56 years old and I work in municipal planning, which means I also understand transit infrastructure in the professional sense. The easements, the zoning, the capital funding, the operational logistics that make a passenger rail service exist. I know what it takes to run a train. I know that a train cannot run without infrastructure, without maintenance, without staff, without the long institutional tail that any moving vehicle on a public track requires. The train I am going to describe lacks all of this. It runs anyway. The station is a small one, a regional platform on a rail line that primarily serves freight, with limited scheduled passenger service on weekends. I have visited the station many times over the years because it is a beautiful station, Beaux-Arts architecture from the 1910s, better maintained than a station of its service level has any right to be. I have a sentimental relationship with this station. The train I first saw there was on a Thursday night in November at approximately 10:45 p.m. No Thursday passenger service is scheduled at this station. I was there because I was documenting the architecture for a preservation article. The train pulled in from the north at 10:47 p.m. I heard it before I saw it. The particular sound of a passenger train braking, different from freight, the squeal of steel on steel and the hiss of air brakes. It came in on the main platform track and stopped. It was a passenger train from the mid-20th century. Not a replica, not a heritage excursion, an actual service-era train, a streamliner of the type that operated in the 1940s and 50s, with that era's particular livery and window design. The paint scheme was one I recognized from photographs, a line that had operated on this route and ceased operations in 1962. I stood on the platform and watched it. The train was lit from within, passenger compartment lighting, the warm glow of occupied cars. I could see people inside. Not clearly, not in detail, but shapes in the windows, the movement of passengers in their seats. The train sat for approximately 4 minutes. No one boarded, no one disembarked. Then it pulled out, southbound, and was gone. I have returned to that station on Thursday nights 11 times since. The train has come 7 of those 11 times, always between 10:30 and 11 p.m., always from the north, always departing south, always the same livery, the same era, the same lit interior. I have photographed it. The photographs show a train on the platform. They show the windows and the exterior detail. They do not show the interior clearly enough to make out the passengers. The photographs are real. I have had them examined, and they show a mid-century streamliner in service-era condition on a platform in a contemporary station. I have researched the line that used this livery. It operated on this corridor from 1948 to 1962, when service was discontinued due to the usual combination of automobile culture and reduced ridership. The line is no more. The rolling stock was sold, scrapped, dispersed. None of it is operational in any documented sense. I found a reference in a local historical archive, a brief newspaper item from 1964, 2 years after the line ceased operation, noting that residents near the station had reported seeing trains of the old service passing through at night, despite the service having ended. The reporter had dismissed it as optical illusion or nostalgia. 1964. The train has been running its Thursday night route, apparently, since at least 1964. 60 years of a train that doesn't exist, carrying passengers I can't clearly see, to a destination southbound that I can't follow because the train outpaces any car by the time it leaves the platform. I have tried to be a systematic observer. I stand at the platform with my camera and my notebook, and I watch the windows as the train sits, and I count the shapes I can see in the cars. The count varies. Different Thursdays, different numbers. Some nights the train appears nearly empty, a few shapes, 1 or 2 per car. Some nights it appears full. I have developed a theory that I offer without confidence. The train serves its original passengers. The people who rode this line in its operational years, who took the Thursday evening southbound in 1948, in 1955, in 1961 are still riding it. The train still runs its last route. Its passengers are still arriving, still departing, still watching the countryside go by from the windows. Going wherever the southbound line goes when it goes there. I stand on the platform every Thursday I can manage it, and I watch a train that doesn't exist carry passengers that may not exist in the way I exist, and I feel each time the particular quality of a place that is occupied by two times simultaneously. The station in 1957. The station now. A platform that belongs to both. And the train crossing the boundary between them, neither here nor there. Running its route because routes, once established, don't always stop when the company does. Because some journeys just keep going. Because the ticket has been bought. The destination remains. Story 16 of 20. Every photo I took showed one extra person. I am a photographer. Not a professional in the sense of income, I have a day job. But a photographer in the sense of serious practice, of thousands of hours with a camera, of the specific attention to the visual world that a committed amateur develops over 15 years. I know how to compose a frame. I know what my lens captures and what it misses. I know the difference between a photographic artifact and photographic content. What appeared in my photographs last spring was content, not artifact, not lens flare, not sensor reflection, not the ghost image that overexposure produces. A person. In every photograph I took, for 7 weeks, there was one person in the frame who had not been there when I pressed the shutter. My name is Maya Chen. The photographs are on my hard drive and on a cloud backup, and I have shown them to 3 other photographers and a digital imaging specialist at a university. All 4 confirm. The images are unaltered. No compositing, no layer manipulation, no evidence of post-processing that adds a figure. The figure is in the raw file, which is captured before any software processing occurs. The figure was in the frame when the photograph was taken. I did not see the figure when I was taking the photographs. The first photograph was a landscape, a park scene, a couple on a bench, trees in the background. There were 4 people visible in the finished image. I had seen 3 people when I composed the shot and pressed the shutter. The 4th, in the finished photograph, was standing at the edge of the tree line, half in shadow, facing the couple on the bench. I went back to the park. I examined the tree line at the location where the figure appeared. No one was there. The figure appeared in the photograph at the time the photograph was taken. It was not someone who happened to be there and whom I had missed. I had looked. I had looked carefully, as photographers do, examining the full frame before capturing it. The figure was not there when I looked. It was in the photograph. I continued photographing. The figure appeared in each one, never in the same position, sometimes in the background, sometimes in the middle ground, sometimes at the very edge of the frame. Never in the foreground, never close, never looking at the camera. Always at some angle, in some relationship to the scene that had its own internal logic. The figure was always doing something, standing, sitting, looking at something in the scene. It was present in the photographs the way people are present in places, with its own agenda, its own relationship to the environment, its own reasons for being where it was. I began to study it. The shape of a person, height suggesting female maybe, or a slight male. The proportion ambiguous at the distances and angles I was working with. Dark clothing, usually. The quality of stillness that, in a photograph, makes a person look more present than those who are in motion. I began composing my shots with the figure in mind. I thought about where it might appear and composed to accommodate it. Some photographs I made were, I thought, better photographs for the figure's inclusion, The composition worked with it. The frame felt balanced in a way that it hadn't without it. I had a show last fall. 7 weeks of photographs, all of them with the extra person. I did not title or label the figure. I let the photographs be what they were. A visitor at the opening, a woman I didn't know, stopped in front of a photograph of a farmer's market and said, "Who is that?" She was pointing at the figure. In the background of a crowded market scene, the figure was visible, standing at a stall, its attention directed at something being sold. "I don't know," I said. "She looks familiar," the woman said. "Does she?" I said. The woman looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she moved on. After the show, another visitor emailed me. He had recognized the figure in 3 of the photographs. He said it looked like his mother, who had died several years before. He described her, slight, dark-clothed, with a particular way of holding herself that he said was in the photographs. He asked if I had known her. I had not. I do not know how a figure that a stranger's dead mother inhabits appears in my photographs without my seeing it. I do not know how any of this works. I know that the figure stopped appearing in the 8th week, as suddenly as it had begun. My photographs have been ordinary since. Only the people who are there know additional presence at the edge of the frame. I miss it. I recognize this as strange. I miss the presence in my photographs, the particular care it had for the spaces I was documenting, the way it stood in the tree line and watched the couple on the bench, the way it moved through the farmer's market, the way it occupied the background of my photographs with its own quiet life. I have hundreds of photographs with the figure in them. I look at them often. I look for what it was looking at. I try to see the scene from its position, from its angle, through whatever it used for eyes. It saw things I didn't see. It was present in places I was photographing without being present in them. A viewer I will never meet, of everything I pointed my camera at, watching the world with me, from the edge of the frame. Story 17 of 20. The lighthouse turned on. 20 years after it closed. The lighthouse at Kramer's Point was decommissioned in 2003, which is the official word for what happens when an automated navigational buoy makes a manned lighthouse redundant and the Coast Guard updates its charts and the light that has been burning for 130 years is extinguished for the last time. The Fresnel lens was removed in 2004. The building was transferred to the County Historical Commission in 2006 and has been maintained as a museum piece since, unstaffed, unlit, closed to the public except on designated tour dates. On October 14th of last year, the light came on. I know the exact date because October 14th is the date the lighthouse was commissioned in 1873. Which is something I know because I have been the keeper of the Historical Commission's records for 11 years, and I know the lighthouse's history the way I know my own address. My name is Sandra Wright. I live approximately a mile from Kramer's Point, and I can see the lighthouse tower from my kitchen window, which is why I was the first person to report it. I was washing dishes at approximately 8 p.m. when the movement caught my eye, the rotation, the specific, deliberate rotation of a lighthouse beam, sweeping the harbor, sweeping the sea. I put down the dish I was washing. I watched for approximately 30 seconds. The light was rotating at the correct period for that lighthouse. I know the period from historical records. 6-second rotation. The light was correct. I called the Historical Commission's emergency contact, my own cell phone technically, since I am the emergency contact. Then I called the Coast Guard station. Then I drove to the lighthouse. There were 3 other cars in the parking area when I arrived. 2 neighbors who had seen the light from their properties, and a man I didn't recognize who had been on the water and had seen it from his boat. We stood in the parking area and watched the light rotate and said the things that people say when something impossible is happening in front of them. The door to the lighthouse was locked. I had the key. I am the keeper of the Historical Commission's records and the actual physical keys. I unlocked it and went in. The lamp room at the top of the lighthouse was dark when I opened the door at the base. The mechanism that rotates a lighthouse's light is a large, complex piece of machinery that in operational lighthouses is either electric or, in historical examples, clockwork. The Kramer's Point Lighthouse had used a clockwork mechanism until electrification in 1942. Then electric drive until decommissioning. The electric drive was removed along with the Fresnel lens in 2004. The clockwork mechanism remained inoperable without winding, its main spring unwound and untouched for 20 years. I climbed the stairs. The lamp room was dark, as I have said. The mechanism was there, as it has always been there. The main spring housing was in its usual state of long unwound inertia. And yet, from outside, from the water, from my kitchen window, the light had been rotating. The Coast Guard confirmed it. Their records from that evening show the light reported at Kramer's Point at the correct period for approximately 45 minutes. Ships that had been in the area reported it. The light was visible from the water for 45 minutes. I have no explanation. The mechanism could not have produced the light. The lens was gone. The electricity had been disconnected from the lamp room circuit when the light was decommissioned. I went back through the Historical Commission's records, as I do when something connects to the lighthouse's history. October 14th. The date of commissioning in 1873. The date I found of a significant rescue in 1931. A storm, a fishing vessel in distress. The lighthouse keeper of that year tracking the vessel through the night with the lighthouse functioning as intended, guiding the vessel safely to harbor. The keeper that year was a man named George Alderman. He had been keeper of the Kramer's Point Lighthouse for 22 years at the time of the rescue. He retired in 1944 after 41 years of keeping the light and died in 1961. I found his journal in the Commission's archive. October entries, year after year, in his careful handwriting. October 14th, recurring as a date he marked with a small notation, the beginning. He used this date as his personal anniversary of the lighthouse's life. A man who kept a light for 41 years and made his private note of its anniversary every year for 4 decades. I think he still does. I think whatever continues in a man who spent 41 years making sure the light worked, making sure the ships could see the point, making sure no one went onto the rocks, I think it still works. Still turns the mechanism, still produces the light by whatever means it has left, still marks October 14th as the beginning. The Coast Guard has added a note to the local charts. An anomaly, they're calling it, an unexplained temporary light at Kramer's Point, occurring on October 14th, to be treated with caution. I call it what it is, a lighthouse keeper doing his job, 20 years after anyone asked him to. Still making sure the ships can see. Story 18 of 20. I found a town hidden beneath the fog. The fog on the coast is not unusual. It is a feature of the geography, the product of cold water and warm air, and the particular dynamics of the Pacific near shore. And anyone who lives on the Northern California coast for more than a season learns to treat it as an ordinary condition rather than an event. It rolls in from the water. It fills the valleys. It renders familiar roads dreamlike and unfamiliar. And then it lifts, and the world is ordinary again. I have lived here for 15 years. I know the fog. What I do not know is the town that is sometimes inside it. My name is Diana Reyes. I work as a naturalist for a land trust, which means I walk these hills and coastlines more than most, in all weather and all light conditions. I know the geography the way a naturalist knows it. Intimately, functionally, with the particular attention that comes from walking the same land in every season over many years. There is no town in the valley north of Point where I first found it. There is a creek, a stand of old-growth redwood, and a meadow that the Land Trust has held in conservation since 1988. Nothing else? No structures, no roads, no infrastructure. I have a GPS track of the valley floor from a survey I did 4 years ago. Open land. I found the town in September, in heavy fog, on a walk I do every autumn to count late-season wildflowers. I was in the valley, following the creek, when the fog thickened to the degree that reduces visibility to 30 or 40 feet. I know this fog. I have walked in it many times. I continued on the creek path. The path ended at a road. I have walked this creek path many times. There is no road, but in the fog, at the point where the creek passes below the meadow's lower edge, there was an unpaved road crossing, rutted, compacted, old. The kind of road that has been used for decades. I followed it north. The town appeared in stages, the way things appear in fog. First the outlines, then the details. A building, wood frame, 2-story, with windows lit from inside. Warm light visible through glass that had the wavy quality of old manufacture. Then another building, similar. Then a street, if you could call it that. An unpaved main thoroughfare. Buildings on both sides, a general store, what might have been a post office or a civic building. A church at the far end with a simple wooden cross. People. The town was occupied. I counted 8 people visible in the street and in windows during the 30 minutes I spent in it. They were dressed in clothing that I had no difficulty reading as early 20th century, not costume, not reenactment. Simply the clothing of a time when this kind of town existed and people lived in it. They moved with the ease of people at home. I was not invisible. 2 of them looked at me. One, a woman in a dark dress, standing at the door of the general store, looked at me steadily for a moment, then turned back inside. No alarm, no particular interest, as if I were a stranger who had wandered in, which is what I was. I did not speak to anyone. I should have. I recognize this as a missed opportunity that I have thought about many times since. I stood in the street of a town that should not exist and watched people go about their business, and I did not say hello or ask anyone's name or ask what year it was. I walked back to the creek path. The fog was thinning. I followed the creek south, and when I looked back, the road was not there. I have found the town again 4 times since, always in heavy fog, always in September or October, when the fog is dense and sustained. Never in summer's thinner coastal clouds, never in winter's rain. The conditions are specific. The town is always there when the conditions are right. The same buildings, the same street, the same warm light in the windows. Different people visible each time, or possibly the same people doing different things. I cannot be certain, because I cannot be certain that my memory of faces holds across the intervals. The Land Trust's historical records note that a small agricultural community existed in that valley in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Farming families, a post office established in 1894 and closed in 1931. The structures were gone by the mid-20th century, burned or dismantled. The archive is unclear. The land was acquired by the trust in the 1980s. A community from 1894 to 1931. 37 years of human occupation. Families living in the valley. A town existing. I think the fog preserves it. Not metaphorically. I think the fog is the medium in which the town still exists. The condition that allows it to be found. The fog that comes off the Pacific and fills the valley does something there that it doesn't do elsewhere. Something about the geography, the old human presence, the 37 years of occupation pressing itself into the land. I have started going to the valley in heavy fog on purpose. I bring my notebook. I have written descriptions of the buildings, the people I've seen, the layout of the street. I am building a record. The woman at the general store looked at me last October. Steadily, calmly, the way you look at a familiar oddity, something you've seen before and have decided not to be concerned about. I think she's seen other people come out of the fog and look at her town. I think she's been looked at for a long time. I would like to speak to her. I am working up to it. Next September, if the fog is right. I'll say hello. I'll ask her name. I'll tell her what year it is, if she wants to know. I think she already knows. I think she's just been waiting for someone to say it out loud. Story 19 of 20. The hotel guest in room 404 was never checked in. I managed hotels for 14 years. I managed the front desk. I managed housekeeping. I managed maintenance. I managed the specific and endless category of problems that hotels produce when you put hundreds of people in close proximity in a building that needs to run 24 hours a day without interruption. I have seen most things that can go wrong in a hotel and most things that can go wrong with hotel guests. I have a high threshold for unusual. Room 404 exceeded my threshold. My name is Helen Park. The hotel where this occurred was a mid-range business hotel in a city I'm going to keep vague, not because I'm protecting anything, but because the hotel is still operating and its guests don't need to be worried. It is a good hotel. It has 412 rooms and a capable staff, and it operates exactly as a hotel of its type should operate. Except for room 404, which for 11 months occupied a category I didn't have. The category is a room that is occupied by someone who is not checked in. The first indication was housekeeping. My head of housekeeping, a woman named Rosa, who had been in the industry longer than I had, reported that room 404 was presenting as occupied when it was listed as vacant. The bed was slept in. The towels were used. The small courtesies we set out, the wrapped soap, the bottled water, were consumed. This has explanations. The most common, a walk-in guest who had been assigned the room without the system being updated properly, or a room that had been sold twice due to a booking platform error. I investigated both. The room had not been assigned to any guest. The booking platform showed no reservation. I checked the keycard logs. Every door in the hotel is electronic. Entry is recorded when a keycard is swiped. Room 404's lock showed no entries for the period in question. The room had been accessed without a keycard. I had the lock inspected. No mechanical override, no evidence of tampering. The lock was functioning correctly. The log showed no entries. Something had been in room 404 and had not entered through the door. I assigned Rosa to make up room 404 and leave it. 2 days later, occupied again. Used towels, consumed water. The bed slept in on one side. I put a camera in the hallway covering room 404's door. The camera was real, functioning, motion activated, uploading to our security server. It was in place for 2 weeks. The camera recorded no one entering or exiting room 404. The room continued to present as occupied on a roughly 3-day cycle. Someone, something, was using the room. The room was showing use. The camera was showing nothing. I stopped remaking the room after 3 weeks. I left it and watched. The housekeeping report shifted. The room was maintaining itself. The bed was being made with hotel precision. The towels were being replaced. The consumed items were not being consumed anymore. Room 404 was keeping itself in guest-ready condition, without housekeeping, without key card access, without any visible means. I looked into the room's history. In 14 years of hotel management, I had not thought to investigate the history of a specific room, but this situation warranted it. I asked the general manager for records going back as far as the hotel's database held. Room 404 had a history of being flagged. Staff notes going back 8 years. Similar reports, similar camera results, similar housekeeping observations. A note from a former manager, someone who had left the property 3 years before I arrived, described the room as self-managing, with no further explanation. I found a housekeeper who had been at the property for 12 years. I asked her about room 404. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for this conversation. "We leave it for her," she said. "Who?" I said. "Long time ago," she said. "Before my time, a woman lived in this hotel for years. Long-term guest, the kind that used to be common. She was here for, 15 years? 20? She loved this hotel. When she died, the room had been hers for so long." She looked at the door of room 404. "We leave it for her. The ones who know leave it." A woman who had lived in room 404 for 15 or 20 years, who had died at some point and had not entirely left, who maintained the room to the standards she had known it at, who kept it guest-ready, who occupied it in the particular way that long-term residents occupy their spaces as their own. I left room 404 off the inventory from that point forward. I told my booking staff it was under renovation, a fiction, but an operational one. The room was kept available, in the specific sense that it was kept for the person who considered it hers. When I left the hotel, I told my successor about the room. She looked at me with the expression I imagine I had given Rosa when Rosa first reported the occupied vacant discrepancy. She would figure it out. They all do. Some guests check out. Some don't. Some rooms belong to the person who lived in them long enough to make them their own. And the hotel, if it knows what it's doing, respects that. The room is there. The door opens for whoever has been there long enough. The bed is always made. The towels are always fresh. Room 404, always ready. Story 20 of 20. The clock stopped every time someone disappeared. There are 47 clocks in my grandmother's house. I know this because I counted them as a child, in the way children count things that fascinate them. And I counted them again after she died, when I inherited the house and the clocks, and the number was the same. 47 clocks. Mantel clocks, wall clocks, pendulum clocks, a cuckoo clock in the upstairs hall, and in the parlor, an enormous floor-standing grandfather clock that my great-grandmother had brought from Europe, and that had been in the family for, as far as anyone could trace, well over a century. The clocks kept time, all 47 of them, wound and maintained by my grandmother with what I now understand was religious dedication. She wound each one on a schedule. She maintained the pendulums. She knew each clock's particular temperament and adjusted accordingly. The house was full of ticking and chiming. It was the sound of the house. When someone disappeared from the family, the clock stopped. My name is Alice Wren. I am the last person living who grew up in that house, and I am going to tell you the history of the clocks with as much precision as I can. Because precision is the only tool I have for something that resists it. The pattern that I can document, and I can document it because my grandmother kept records, a handwritten ledger that I found after her death, begins in 1943. My great-uncle Vincent left for the war in 1942 and did not come home. The date of his death was never officially confirmed. He was listed as missing in action, and missing is where he stayed. The clock stopped on the day the telegram arrived saying he was missing. My grandmother notes this in her ledger with characteristic terseness. All stopped. Vincent, March 1943. Then, below this, started again 6 days later. She notes which ones started on their own and which required winding. The grandfather clock is noted as the last to start, 4 days after the others. There are 6 more entries in the ledger. 1957. A cousin who drowned, body not recovered. The clock stopped for 8 days. 1961. A great-aunt who walked out of a hospital in a confused state and was never found. 3 days. 1978. A second cousin who disappeared from college. Case never solved. 11 days, the longest. And then my grandmother's own note from 1989. She has written, in the ledger, a date. Just a date. And below it the words, "I won't be here to see them start." But they will. My grandmother died on a Tuesday. She was 91. She had been in declining health, and her death was not unexpected, and yet when I arrived at the house that evening, all 47 clocks were stopped. She had died in the afternoon. The neighbor who had found her said the grandfather clock in the parlor had been audible until she arrived, and then, as she was in the house, it had stopped. She had not been disturbed by this. She had known my grandmother for 40 years. The clock started again in stages over the following 12 days. The small ones first, the mantel clocks, the kitchen clock, the wall clocks in the bedrooms, the cuckoo clock on the 4th day, and the grandfather clock, the great-grandmother's clock from across the ocean, the last of all, on the 12th day. I stood in the parlor when it started. I heard it, a long, slow resumption of the pendulum's swing, one beat and then another, the mechanism catching its rhythm. I stood and listened to it come back to itself. I live in the house now. I maintain the clocks the way my grandmother maintained them, on her schedule, wound and adjusted according to her notes. I have learned each clock's temperament. I know which ones run slightly fast and which need their pendulums weighted. I have had the house for 6 years since my grandmother died. The clocks have not stopped again. I think about the pattern in the ledger. I think about what the clocks are responding to. Not death, not exactly, because the recorded stoppages are all for disappearances. The drowned cousin whose body wasn't found. The great-aunt who walked out of the hospital. The college cousin whose case is still open. Vincent, missing in action since 1943. Not death, the absence that follows death when the body isn't there, when the ending doesn't conclude, when someone goes and doesn't arrive anywhere that can be documented. The open cases, the unresolved endings, the people who are somewhere between gone and not gone. The clocks stop for the ones who are still in between, and when they start again, and they always start again, according to the ledger, I think the starting is something. An arrival somewhere. A conclusion reaching the house through whatever channel the clocks are connected to. The cousin who drowned. 8 days. Her body was found on the 7th day, several miles downstream. The clock started the following morning. The great-aunt from the hospital. 3 days. She was found alive, confused, in a town 40 miles away, on the 3rd day. The clocks knew. I maintain the clocks, and I keep the ledger, and I listen to 47 mechanisms filling the house with the sound of time being kept. It is the right sound for this house. It is the sound of all the lives it has held, all the time that has passed in it, all the comings and goings and the ones who didn't come back. The grandfather clock ticks in the parlor. The cuckoo clock announces the hours. The mantel clocks in the front room mark the quarters. All 47 running, everyone accounted for. The open case is closed. For now, time keeps being kept. And the house, full of its ticking and chiming, waits for the next silence. And the silence after that. and the starting again.